the president has made it quite clear that if narco-terrorists, again, are trafficking illegal drugs towards the United States, he has the authority to kill them. And that's what this administration is doing.
High risk, high stakes.
Fentanyl precursors are what makes up fentanyl. While we, the interagency, the Department of Justice, have been fighting hard to seize and stop drug traffickers, we must attack fentanyl precursors, the ingredients necessary to make this lethal drug.
The administration has stated without hesitation that when narco-terrorist groups direct illegal drug operations toward the United States, the government has full authority to stop them with force. That policy has already set the tone for what followed. Late one night in El Paso, a quiet community was torn apart by a sudden and precision-driven attack. An unmarked SUV rolled silently into a small convenience store parking lot before erupting in a controlled burst of gunfire. When it ended, 3 men lay dead, 2 off-duty officers, and the individual they were assigned to protect. Investigators knew almost instantly that this scene was no random act of violence. The timing, the efficiency, and the surgical escape all pointed to a coordinated cartel execution staged on American soil. The intended target was a man named Nico Delta Cruz, an operator who had spent years moving people, drugs, and illicit money through hidden routes in Texas and New Mexico. One of his most valuable assets was a reinforced underground tunnel equipped with lighting and ventilation, proof of a far deeper network at work. But once that tunnel was discovered, Cruz became a liability to the very organization he served. And in cartel doctrine, liabilities are removed with bullets. The events in El Paso were not isolated. They were the opening signal of something far more dangerous already pressing into the United States. In the days that followed the execution, federal agents expanded their investigation, not simply to find the shooters, but to expose the structure that made such an attack possible. What emerged was larger, more organized, and far more alarming than expected. This was not the operation of a small crew. It was the footprint of a network quietly embedded inside the United States. For years, Cruz had been more than a smuggler. He served as a conduit between cartel leadership in Mexico and a hidden pipeline stretching from New Mexico into Texas. This route moved migrants, illicit cash, and narcotics deeper into the country while avoiding detection. Once his tunnel was exposed, his own organization marked him as a threat, someone who had seen too much and could reveal everything under pressure. That was when investigators began hearing a name whispered with fear: Larissa. Unlike traditional cartels, Larissa operated like a disciplined insurgent group. They left clean scenes, avoided unnecessary chaos, and moved with calculated precision. Migrants were treated as currency. Silence was their shield. Accuracy was their signature. During the last 18 months alone, federal records linked 27 targeted killings to Larissa. Each attack was executed with controlled bursts and quiet efficiency. Surveillance systems were disabled before shots were fired, revealing a level of planning that resembled military operations. Drug seizures showed the same pattern. Hundreds of pounds of meth, high-purity fentanyl, modified vehicles, and mobile stash units built for rapid hostage movement. When joint FBI and intelligence teams traced Cruz's operations in the Sunland Park and Las Cruces, the truth became undeniable. Hidden inside ordinary neighborhoods were not decaying stash houses, but organized detention sites. Behind locked doors, more than 50 migrants were found standing shoulder to shoulder, uncertain of where they were or what would happen next. Some believed they were still in Mexico. Others thought they were minutes away from release. None understood that they were being stored as inventory. Every search reinforced the same conclusion. Larissa was not pushing north. It was already here. It had already rooted itself inside suburbs, behind drawn curtains, and within commercial fronts. It was building routes, gathering weapons, and preparing for expansion. After the El Paso attack, one fact became impossible to ignore. Larissa's presence had not appeared overnight. It had been growing for years. What came next would show just how deeply this organization had embedded itself inside American communities and how much ground it intended to claim. By the end of the week, federal authorities were done observing from distance. The execution in El Paso, the discovery of migrants in Las Cruces, and the safe houses scattered across Sunland Park no longer looked like isolated events. Taken together, they revealed a coordinated effort to establish territorial control inside the United States. At sunrise on a Thursday morning, an unprecedented federal response was launched. Agencies including the FBI, ICE, DHS, and state troopers merged resources under a unified command spread across Texas and New Mexico. Command centers lit up with satellite imagery, drone surveillance, and months of intelligence data. These teams were not preparing for routine arrests. They were preparing for open conflict. The first strike occurred in Las Cruces. Agents had been monitoring a gray SUV tied to several smuggling operations. When the vehicle pulled into a residential neighborhood, teams moved in. 3 armed men stepped out with long rifles, acting as though they controlled the area. When boxed in by unmarked vehicles, the suspects refused to surrender and attempted to flee. The pursuit tore through suburban streets until the suspect vehicle crashed into a backyard fence. The gunmen bolted toward a house and forced their way inside, firing a warning shot. Agents returned fire in a brief but intense confrontation that lasted less than 2 minutes. Inside, authorities discovered a stockpile of weapons, ammunition, tactical vests, encrypted radios, and 3 terrified migrants awaiting ransom calls that might never have come. But the Las Cruces raid was only the beginning. Within hours, additional teams stormed safe houses in Sunland Park, the outskirts of El Paso, and several rural pockets of Texas. Some suspects surrendered immediately, but others resisted with sudden violence. In one home near Anthony, Texas, gunfire erupted the moment agents breached the door. Another team, searching an abandoned trailer near Deming, encountered pressure plates and tripwires, evidence that Larissa had begun constructing military-style traps. By nightfall, dozens of cartel affiliates were in custody. Migrants were rescued, stash vans were seized, and more than 40 firearms were pulled from various hideouts. But inside the command center, officials shared a sobering understanding. Larissa had not been surprised by the raids. It had simply been delayed, and cartels that lose ground seldom retreat quietly. Retaliation arrived quickly and violently. In Laredo, a white pickup riding low on its rear axle caught the attention of federal patrol. When agents attempted to stop, the truck accelerated before ramming the patrol vehicle head-on. Both vehicles flipped. Inside the pickup were 6 dead individuals, 3 smugglers and 3 migrants who never had a chance to escape. To investigators, it looked less like a desperate escape attempt and more like a deliberate act of aggression. Hours later, Arizona witnessed something even more chilling. A convoy of state troopers traveling through a remote highway reported a black SUV approaching at high speed. Before they could respond, automatic gunfire erupted. One patrol vehicle spun into a ditch, while another, stopped on the shoulder, was deliberately targeted and engulfed in flames. The attack resembled a military ambush executed with trained bursts and rapid withdrawal. No suspects were captured. The violence soon spilled beyond border regions. In California's Central Valley, officers investigating stash houses faced the unthinkable. A veteran officer was ambushed on his way home. Witnesses described short, controlled bursts, Larissa's unmistakable mark. His vehicle drifted to the curb and came to rest with its lights still on. What had once been scattered incidents was now a clear and coordinated pattern. Larissa, once a shadow moving quietly north, had begun acting like an organized strike force, testing the strength of American law enforcement across 4 states. Departments issued internal alerts. Officers were told not to travel alone, even off duty. Rural counties requested additional armor and tactical support. Many agencies began escorting officers home after shifts, a measure not seen since the cartel wars that once dominated northern Mexico. The Southwest was no longer on the edge of crisis. It was inside one. As the violence surged across the Southwest, another crisis began unfolding in the shadows, one that rarely reached national headlines but carried consequences every bit as deadly. Along the migrant routes stretching from El Paso to Tucson and through the rugged desert corridors of Southern California, thousands of people seeking safety were stepping directly into territory controlled by criminal networks. These groups didn't see migrants as vulnerable travelers. They saw them as revenue, leverage, and in many cases, disposable assets. During the raids in Sunland Park, agents found migrants who had been shuffled across multiple states before being locked in dark, airless rooms. Many had no idea where they were or who held them. Some believed they were still in Mexico. Others thought their release was moments away. In reality, they were being held until cartel operatives contacted their families and demanded thousands of dollars in ransom. Farther west, ranchers in southern Arizona discovered abandoned camps filled with torn clothing, scattered documents, and traces of hurried escapes. According to border reports, armed scouts watched over remote desert routes like sentries. Migrants who attempted to avoid cartel-controlled areas were intercepted regardless. Some were beaten, some were taken. Others simply vanished under the cover of night. In one case, a young woman was found alone in a dry riverbed. She described how armed men approached her group, selected several people at random, and forced them into a truck. She never saw them again, only heard their cries as they were driven away. Investigators later confirmed that Larissa had begun using migrants for more than smuggling fees. Some were forced to carry packages across state lines. Some were photographed and threatened, their images used to extort families. Others were told they had a choice: work for the cartel or disappear. Even law enforcement felt the shift. Search teams found shoes, backpacks, and children. By the time federal teams finished sorting through intelligence from the raids, one reality could no longer be dismissed. The violence was no longer limited to border towns. It had spread into suburbs, farms, highways, and mid-sized cities across the Southwest. Officers were being ambushed. Migrants were being hunted. Families were living in fear. And Larissa was not slowing down. It was accelerating. Washington could no longer view this as a regional issue. Inside the White House Situation Room, officials reviewed footage from joint operations, satellite images showing coordinated movements across the desert, and intercepted calls linking stash houses from New Mexico all the way into California's Central Valley. The conclusion formed quickly and quietly. This was no longer traditional organized crime. This was infiltration. A foreign-backed criminal group had planted a functioning network inside the United States. Within hours, the administration announced a sweeping response. Federal agencies, FBI, ICE, DHS, ATF, and Border Patrol, were ordered to merge their efforts under one unified counter-cartel initiative. It marked the largest anti-cartel mobilization on U.S. soil in more than a decade. 3 priorities guided the mission. First, dismantle the smuggling routes that allowed Larissa to move people, weapons, and cash across multiple states. Drones and aircraft were reassigned to track suspicious vehicles and identify relay points hidden in rural terrain. Second, cripple the organization's finances. Analysts began tracing bank transfers, small business earnings, crypto wallets, and shell companies linked to stash operations. Many of the businesses looked legitimate: restaurants, transport services, repair shops, but quietly funneled profits back to cartel leadership. Third, protect law enforcement. With targeted attacks escalating, departments shifted to 2-unit patrols, issued reinforced gear, and deployed tactical teams to support smaller agencies. Officers who? Single Insider exists for one reason: to expose the hidden machinery operating beneath the surface of everyday life. This is the place where shadows are dissected, systems are unraveled, and the truth, no matter how buried, finds a way to the light. In an age where information is twisted, diluted, and manipulated, Single Insider steps past the noise and goes directly to the real engine room of crime, corruption, covert deals, and institutional failure. This channel does not tell ordinary stories. It reconstructs the kind of operations that powerful people prefer to keep buried. Every investigation crafted here follows a single principle. Nothing happens without a network supporting it. A cartel shipment does not move without an insider. A corrupt officer does not rise without protection. A region does not collapse without warning signs. Single Insider follows these threads with precision, uncovering how one decision, one loophole, or one compromised official can trigger a domino effect capable of destabilizing entire communities. This channel specializes in deep dive breakdowns of criminal networks, financial corruption, hidden pipelines, and systemic failures that shape real-world outcomes. Whether the story begins at a quiet seaport, a busy border crossing, a corrupt management office, or a failed political decision, Single Insider shows the entire chain of events. Every link, every player, every consequence. The channel goes beyond headlines, beyond rumors, and far beyond the shallow surface-level information most audiences are used to consuming. Single Insider builds narratives out of real patterns, real evidence, and real-world logic. These are not fictional stories. These are reconstructions of operations that operate in silence while the world sleeps. Operations that attach themselves to weak institutions, broken leadership, blind trust, and the vulnerabilities that criminals exploit with surgical accuracy.